We had a welcome by wonderful Amy. It's going to take about 30 minutes for the presentation. And then we're going to have a short Q&A, and it's going to be a hybrid between in the room and online. The people that are joining from online, you're welcome to write questions in the comments, in the chat, in the Q&A. I'm so sorry, in the Q&A. And those questions will be fielded by Amy, and she will ask them on your behalf. For the ones of you that are here in person, we're going to have a mingle afterwards where we all get to chat. We have some material down in the back. There's some refreshments as well. We're really excited to have conversations with you all. For the ones of you that could not join us tonight, but are joining from back from online, we will share a link with a survey where you can also provide input online. So without further ado, welcome everyone. Welcome to the first presentation for the future of Virginia Street Placemaking Study. So I want to just really quickly talk to what we're actually looking at, because Virginia Street is long, right? And downtown Virginia Street is one part in some people's mind and one part in other people's mind. So I want to make sure that we're all on the same page. We're looking at Virginia Street from the university and all the way down to Liberty, to where Midtown starts. And then, of course, we're looking at it in the context of downtown. So even though the project focus is placemaking on Virginia Street, it's part of a network, so we can't just design it in isolation. So it's really important that all these spaces work together, even though the focus of the actual project is Virginia Street. So placemaking, what is placemaking? So there's a lot of different versions of defining this, but for us, it really means that we take a people-centered approach to planning, design, and management of public space. And that really involves making sure that we have a process where we get to hear as much as possible from as broad an audience as possible that are the ones that are going to be using the spaces that we're looking at. We come from San Francisco, Copenhagen, other places. We're not the everyday users of this place. So it's really important for us that as part of this process, we get as many voices heard as possible. And why is the placemaking important, and why now? Why is this study important? So just a couple of things about general trends that we're seeing in cities across America. You all know this really well. The pandemic has really changed how we live, work, and play. Our sphere of movement in our cities, the way we use our neighborhood, the way we socialize, there's been a lot of changes. But one thing from an urban design perspective that we've seen is a big shift, is that streets are really seen as public space. And it's resonating more and more that this is a really valuable asset in our cities. It's a lot of space. So why not look at whether we can make a more democratic use of those streets and accommodate a more diverse use of them. And we're seeing across the US that a lot of downtown main streets are leading this change. Some of them have been closed during COVID or open to people, if you want to say. And are now in this process of thinking about, okay, what do we really want our streets to be? Do we want them to be shared? Do we want it to be only for pedestrians? What do we want them to be? And this is a really exciting time in downtown planning. One challenge that we run into in a lot of places is that online shopping has increased, which means that the draw to come to downtown is shifting. So what are our downtowns going to be in the future? One of the other things that we've really seen with the pandemic is that a lot of people are thinking a lot more about their local life and their immediate area around where they live. And for a downtown, that really means that if you don't have a local population, then what happens if you have a pandemic? well, the downtown gets empty. We saw that in San Francisco. A lot of office workers left because they could work from home. Businesses suffered, and it's going to be a long recovery. So with all this, for downtowns to thrive, it's really important to think about diversity, because diversity is resilience. So what does this mean for the street itself? I'm going to get a little bit more into what that could mean further in the presentation. But I want to turn the focus back on Reno, because that's why we're here. And actually, one thing that's really interesting is that downtown Reno is ahead of the curve in many ways. So a lot of downtowns we come to in the capacity of our work are struggling with one thing, that is, how do we bring housing down here? And we're actually seeing a fair amount of residential building going on in the downtown, which is something that a lot of other downtowns would envy, that doesn't have that. But that also means that there is an increased local population, and they're going to be asking for amenities. They're going to need amenities. And with this, it means that the downtown is on a trajectory to become what we call a complete neighborhood, where people live, people work, people play, an increased diverse population. And with that, the need for amenities will increase, both built amenities and public realm amenities. So the placemaking study really comes at a good time, because it's critical to get ahead of the changes coming to downtown and make sure that the public realm is on par with the built environment. So the investments, that goes into the built environment needs to be matched. The public realm needs to work harder. It needs to also be great places for people. Because the public realm, streets, plazas, parks, is really the connective tissues of our communities. This is where we all meet, outside of our home, outside of our car, outside of our workplace. And with more housing and jobs, people will have places to live, study, and work. So they will need places to safely and comfortably move between their place of residence, work, study, to run errands, to meet and socialize as a community as well. So that's really important. This is an unprecedented opportunity. As I said, many cities would really envy this change that you are on a trajectory of. And again, I can attest to it coming from San Francisco. They are behind on this. So it is a challenge that many downtowns face that doesn't have a local population. Reno has a local population in downtown, and it's growing, so that's really strong. In this process, it's also really important that diverse voices get heard and that people unite around making this change happen, because change is not going to happen in isolation. It's not going to happen from one source. It's really about the community coming together to create this change and build it around a shared vision. It's also important to think about change as a process. It's not going to happen overnight, but this placemaking project will help set the stage for the change process and define what matters to you all as people that live and work in Reno. So we want to use this opportunity to hear from you all and help us think about how this physically can manifest itself in the public realm on and around Virginia Street. And that's why we're here. And with this project, Reno also joins cities around the country and the globe that are leaning more and more into change facilitation instead of implementation. And that's really interesting to me. So a couple of examples of projects that are from cities in North America that are on a trajectory to transforming their downtowns. This is a couple of images from Denver, where 16th Street Mall is undergoing a transformation from becoming a little bit more than just a transit corridor. This was important because downtown businesses were suffering. The only public life they were seeing on the street were people waiting for the bus, and people didn't really come to the businesses. So there was a lot of vacancies. So what the downtown partnership did was that they said, like, let's try and take the buses out for a weekend and see what happens. Let's put out some chairs, tables, invitations for people to spend time. And all of a sudden, it was a completely different place. The iterative component of that is not what's the most important in itself, is to show change instead of tell what change can be. And it actually led to a really successful outcome where the future transformation, which is a capital investment, is going to balance place and movement. So some buses are going to come back, but you're also going to have more opportunities for people to spend time, sit, enjoy the space, and come together. San Jose is another interesting city. They have been doing a lot for local businesses, and this particular example is called Moment, where they have taken 6 space of a parking garage, about 12 spaces, fronting a street, and turn it into 4 micro retail units for local businesses. And not only did this opportunity, this provided opportunities for local businesses to have a brick and mortar that they otherwise might not be able to afford, but it also activated a somewhat not so interesting and engaging facade into something that people now want to engage and spend time at. So now it's a thriving public space, and you feel it when you walk there. It feels safer. There's other people around. And up until now, there's been a rotation of 10 businesses that have been that pop up in the space. Another example is downtown Mountain View, where they have been sort of tampering with the idea, or like thinking about the idea of closing the downtown Main Street. And when COVID hit, they did it as a economic recovery response and closed 3 blocks for outdoor dining. And people loved it so much that they wanted to see it become permanent. So now the city is on a trajectory to change 3 blocks of this downtown street into a public space. And one of the things that's really important to mention here is that, you know, a lot of businesses suffered through the pandemic. We all know that. And the same happened in Mountain View, but on Castro Street itself, there was actually also businesses that saw an increase in their income. So by providing places for people to spend time and socialize, you actually also impact local businesses. And one of the things that Mountain View has going for it on their main street is that all of the businesses are local businesses. It's small units. So it really speaks to the local population. It's the things that they want. It's not just for people that come from the outside. Really briefly, this is another mid-sized city in the US in West Palm Beach, where they changed one of the downtown main streets into a shared street. And they actually went for the capital investment right away. They were like, this street needs to be better. We don't have a lot of cars on it today. So let's rethink how we use this space. And after implementation, they saw an increase in people spending time. They got demand for outdoor dining, and it has really proven to be a very, very good investment for the city. So all these projects show that being mindful about how to invest and why and who you're doing this for actually pays dividends. But change, as I said, is an iterative process. Virginia Street is not going to change overnight. And we are here because we want to create a shared vision with all of you, so we can ensure that we're setting Virginia Street up for success. So a little bit about what we've done so far and what we've learned. We have taken a multi-method approach to understand the placemaking opportunities in Virginia Street. We've done desktop research to understand work done in the city to date and planned. We spent time on site, walking all of downtown until our shoe soles were worn. We've spent time with all the different city departments, and on site, really to like experience Virginia Street through the Gehl lens, which is people first urban design. So we look at what's the quality of the public realm today and how does that respond to the public life that we see in the street. So that's one thing, but what has been really, really insightful for us is that we heard from almost 3,000 people via an online survey, where we asked people about how they use Virginia Street today and how they would like to be able to use it in the future. And this is a really critical component for us in defining opportunities and current challenges to achieve success. And just to say, this is a really impressive turnout. This is numbers that we get in cities that are like 5-10 times bigger than Reno. So for us, that means people really care. That's really important. So what have we learned so far? Well, one big thing that we learned through the online survey was that there is consensus among respondents to the online survey that Virginia Street is a central part of downtown Reno. 90% of the respondents stated this. There's also consensus that it needs to do better for locals to want to spend time there. So what does that mean? This is what we're here to learn. And so what are some of the challenges with that, the opportunities to change Virginia Street? So we really learned, one of the things that we learned through this process was that Virginia Street draw locals, visitors for events, but it's not really a place that Renoites gravitate towards every day. So when we asked people about this specific question, they expressed the need for more public life, more eyes on the street for them to come to downtown Virginia Street. You all know this, Virginia Street is famous for the events it has on the street. A lot of people come for those, but the everyday version of Virginia Street does not have that same draw and feel that you get when you come for an event. When there's no events, if you go there on a regular day, there's not a lot of people out necessarily, but there's also not a ton of invitations to linger. One of the things that we look at in terms of measuring that is like whether there's any public seating. That's very limited. So that's one metric that tells us that the everyday invitations are not quite there. But there's actually quite a lot of space to work with on the sidewalk itself and on adjacent spaces and plazas. So it's not space that's the issue. We just need to figure out what do we put here that makes people want to come. And one of the things that was mentioned by a lot of people was that they don't feel safe all the time at all times of day on Virginia Street. And a lot of people mentioned this specific thing, and it's because there's no one else around. So that's, to us, is a really critical component. Another thing that we look at when we look at a street or a public space is how does the built environment engage with the space? And when you look at Virginia Street, you actually learn that 70% of the facades along the street are what we quote unquote call dead facades that doesn't engage with the street. This is a really important factor in whether people feel engaged with the space, whether they feel safe. It's part of the eyes on the street component. And this is something that can be worked with. So that's a really critical number. So what can we do with this knowledge? We can look at whether it's possible to convert some of this underused sidewalk and plaza space into inviting people for places for people, seating, small scale, repeat programming, and building edge activation. What does this mean? Well, it could maybe look something like this, or maybe it looks something like this. This is what we're here to figure out. We also learned through our studies that Virginia Street has a rich history, but does not reflect the culture and creativity cherished by Renoites and visitors alike. When asked, Renoites told us that they love the history of Virginia Street, they love the arch and the art, but they also stated somewhat like, sentimental things about what it used to be, and that is not quite what it used to be. So there's something that's not quite right for people with what it is today, but there's love for what it was and what it can become. And that's really important. But the really iconic features people express a lot of love for, the arch, for instance, being able to cruise underneath it is something that's mentioned quite a lot. We experienced observing out in the street that a lot of people try to take photos of the arch and they're like, oh, where do I stand? Oh, there's a car coming. So maybe we need to think about facilitating that use and create invitations also for the people that are not cruising, for the people that are walking. And on Virginia Street and along Virginia Street, there's also beloved historic buildings. This is something that people brought up a lot. But one of the things that we're seeing is that the buildings are not necessarily fronted with a public space that is on par with the quality of the building. So maybe there's something there that we can work with. The alleys came up quite a lot. People love the historic alleys. And they are important service functions, and we understand that, but maybe there are ways where we could look at them to serve for a little bit more as well. They have something really good going for them. They're human scale, they're really comfortable, they're shade when it's really hot, and it's fine grained. There just needs to be a little bit more activity for people to feel safe and comfortable. The art was mentioned quite a lot, and we see it very clearly when we're out there ourselves. There's a lot of incredible murals, and they bring delight. But we also think that given the culture of creativity that the city of Reno has, the residents of Reno has, that the arts and programming could be doing more for the downtown. So what is the opportunity here? There is an opportunity to provide quality public space for appreciation of iconic signage and historical buildings, and include the alleyways in the downtown public space network with art and programming. So what is that going to look like for Reno? Well, in Nashville, it looks like this. That might not be what it should look like for Reno, but what is Reno's version of it? In Chicago, it looks like this. What is Reno's version of this? Another thing we learned was that Virginia Street physically connects well-visited downtown destinations, and there's quite a lot of them, but few Renoites choose active mobility to get around. So one of the things that was expressed quite a lot was that people want to be able to safe and comfortably walk and wheel, so use micromobility and bikes, but they also appreciate being able to drive. So we need to look at whether we can find the right balance so everybody feels invited. The data tells us that today most people drive. But one thing that's interesting is that we all become pedestrians when we park our car. So we need to think about that as well. Like, it's not that you shouldn't drive, but what happens when you park your car? How can we actually facilitate a great pedestrian experience from where you park into where you are going? There's quite a lot of space to work with on Virginia Street. That's good news. So we actually believe we have a lot of room to play and room to provide invitations for a lot of different users. Oh, I'm sorry. But overall, when you look at the network, and we're not here to do network planning, we're looking at Virginia Street specifically, but it's important to think of it in the street network. There's a lot of the streets that are not that walkable, and there's different reasons for it, but it just makes trips between destinations less desirable without a car. So when people actually do choose to walk, which we do, which some of you probably do, or you bike, there's just like some of the sidewalk conditions where it's not quite there. There's pretty limited bike infrastructure as well, and you feel pretty exposed in a lot of places to traffic, to the elements, so the weather, which we live with the weather, but there's also ways we can make it more comfortable for ourselves. One of the pieces that we want to look at and we want to hear from you all is the intersections. So a lot of these intersections that we see along Virginia Street, there's not a ton of time necessarily to cross as a pedestrian, or you might have to wait for a long time before you can cross. And they're really designed for fast moving vehicles. So can we think about better facilitating walking and biking through the intersections to make it safe for everybody? It's not about taking out the cars. It's just about looking at the details and sort of nudging and thinking so it becomes more comfortable for people walking and wheeling. And as I said, you know, the signal timing is not always in favor for people walking. You press the button and ask to get across the street, and it sometimes takes so long that you just walk if there's no cars. So this is also something that could be looked at. We saw a lot of people crossing outside of the designated crossing areas, as we call it. Others might use the term jaywalking. It sounds a little bit less positive to me, so we use the designated crossing time. And so there are some things to look at here with the intersections and maybe the signal timing. And the numbers really reflect the few people walking and biking on Virginia Street. Out of 11,300 daily trips, 1 in 6 is walking. And for an entertainment street, that's strikingly low pedestrian numbers. In comparison, Nashville has 4,500 people an hour. I know it's a very different context. It's a different type of entertainment street, but it does say something about an opportunity here. And then in addition, the population of Reno is not represented. We see very few kids taking trips on Virginia Street compared to trips across Reno, where there's actually a better representation. So there's something that's not quite working with downtown Virginia Street. So what is the opportunity here? Well, we have an opportunity to elevate the baseline for active mobility users of all ages and abilities with comfortable and shaded sidewalks, quality bike lanes, and safe crossings. What could that look like? It might look something like this for Reno. It might look something like this for Reno. So again, this is what we're here to learn. Lastly, we also learned that Virginia Street is home to businesses that are an important part of the downtown DNA, but it lacks amenities that has a local draw. So what does this mean? When surveyed, we learned from the plus 2,700 respondents that the casinos are an important part of the DNA of the city. But people want to see more local shops and eateries mixed in. So when you look at the built form, one of the challenges is that there's a lot of large businesses that turn their back to the street with very few entrances or limited access. Some of these bigger buildings have a lot of great things inside them, but when you walk by, you don't necessarily know. So that's like another important component. Because there's actually a lot of offerings on Virginia Street. As a visitor, someone who comes to like get to learn about the city and get to know the city, it's a little bit of a scavenger hunt. So could we turn some of these invitations inside out, or find ways to like make small invitations along the street happen? This could really help with a lot of the challenges that we see, including the safety, which is something that was brought up quite a lot by people. We don't need to look to all these examples from other places in the world. A lot of people in the survey mentioned that Midtown has this local draw. It has the small scale businesses. This is where you go. It's walkable. It's something that people want more of. This was expressed a lot in the survey. That doesn't mean that the rest of Virginia Street should look like that. But we need to think about, like, how does this translate to Virginia Street from Liberty to the university? People also love the Riverwalk. I get that. It's an incredible amenity. So there are a lot of things in Reno that we can learn from. It's just a matter of thinking about how does that translate to Virginia Street? So there might be an opportunity here to think about how we can bring Reno entrepreneurs and Virginia Street property owners together to convert inactive ground floors to thriving businesses and amenities with local and visitor draw. So that might look like this. We're going to test something, see if people respond to it. It might look like this. Again, that's what we're here to figure out. So a lot of what I just presented is probably not news to you. You all know your city really well, but it's really important for us to define these challenges and compile them in a succinct way where we can use this to really set the stage for the change process. And this is going to be translated into a set of goals and a vision that can drive the design outcome. So that's part of what we're here for today. We want to hear from all of you what you think is the right thing for the future of Virginia Street. And that's going to be used to craft a project vision, a set of measurable goals, and some design outcomes that we're going to come back to you all and show for further input. So in its essence, kind of thinking about, like, how can we change to become more of what we love, more of what is great? And what are some of the changes that might need to happen to be a little bit different? So this is not about changing and, like, you know, in with the new, out with the old. It's about thinking about what are things that are really valued and what are things that might, you know, need some tweaks. So as Amy mentioned, we are almost at our midway of the project process. But before we start to get into the actual design, it was really important for us to identify the challenges and opportunities. We really appreciate all the input that we've already gotten through the online survey, and we look forward to hearing from all of you today as well. So the next steps will really be to translate what we hear tonight and over the next couple of weeks, what the survey will be online, into, as I said, a vision for the project, for the street, a set of measurable goals, and an implementation plan with some tangible design components tied to it. So we have a couple of requests for your input, and then there's going to be a little Q&A. And the Q&A is going to be hybrid, so bear with us. It's a little bit of a trial. We're going to take some questions both from online and from the audience in the room here. We want to hear from you whether what was just presented resonate with you and your experience of Virginia Street. We also want to hear from you what kind of placemaking that you would like to see in Virginia Street. And with this question, like, try and think a little bit also about, like, what would make you want to, like, maybe come visit more, spend more time, bring your family there, go with friends in the future. And then, you know, change takes a village, whether you are a content creator, a spectator, or a cheerleader. A successful change process requires community engagement and community support. So we also want to hear from you if you see yourself potentially playing a role in this change process, in addition to providing your really, really valuable input to the project. If you're joining us online, we will post a link of the online survey after the Q&A. And if you're joining us in person, we look forward to mingling with all of you by the boards we have here for your input after the Q&A. So we're going to have the Q&A first.